Welcome to the Live and Learn podcast, Sarah. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Alice. How are you going?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you've flown in fresh from Australia to be here with us.
Yes, no, thank you for having me. It was a bit of a long trip, but I'm really glad to be here.
Well, we're honoured to have you joining us in this brand new setup as well. If you watch previous episodes, you might recognise different background. But we're going to be talking today about AI, specifically misconceptions and sort of perhaps debunking some myths around it in learning and development. So to kick us off, do you want to say a bit about yourself and who you are, what you do?
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Sarah Mateljan. I'm the co-founder of GenLearn. We make it easy for people to add AI-led teaching to their online training, and that helps to improve the impact of the online training.
Nice. And you've got plenty of experience in the field of learning and development, but you actually started or qualified as a lawyer, didn't you?
Yes, that's right. I originally qualified as a lawyer, and then I started another company called LawCPD quite a while back. And basically it provides online continuing professional development for lawyers. And it's been a really great journey with that company. And it was actually a desire for us to make that training more engaging and impactful that we started experimenting with generative AI and working out ways we could use it inside our training to make it more interesting for people to engage with the training and actually apply what they were learning. And from that came GenLearn, which is the ability for anyone to build those conversations and add them into their online training.
Nice. Yeah, I can imagine you probably don't think necessarily of the most engaging environment when you think about law training. Imagine there's a lot of intricate detail to go through.
Yeah, there is. So being able to make sure that the training's accurate is also really important as well as engaging. But it's been a really fun journey.
Yeah. Nice. Well, you're perfectly qualified then to talk to us about AI. And I guess to kind of kick off the discussion, we're well aware that since AI has been introduced specifically in the learning and development sphere, there's been a lot of anxiety generally around it, lots of people unsure, the main one being, is AI going to replace me or take my job? I know definitely working in marketing is something that's come up since ChatGPT entered the scene. It's very much, it can write things for you. So I guess what would kind of your first thoughts be around people who are worried that AI is going to replace human skills, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I understand why people feel that way. I mean, it's reasonable when you're faced with such a revolutionary technology to be worried about the impact it will have. But the reality is that AI is a tool. And like lots of other tools, they don't make humans obsolete. Humans just need to learn how to use them to their best effect. And one of the really exciting things about AI and L&D that I'm seeing is that AI and humans are working in partnership to produce this much better training. So you're not getting rid of the humans, you're actually drawing on the human skills. And we've seen lots of examples of that, if you'd like me to share about that. So we've seen lots of really great examples of how humans and AI can work together and complement each other in L&D. So one really great example I saw recently was a person who wanted to develop training for humanitarian workers who are going into disaster zones, and they need to set up communication equipment. Now that's a super specialised skill set there.
It's niche.
And it's not something that the AI really knows very well as part of its training data, but you can use the AI to scale the training. So originally they were only able to do this training in person, which really limited who they could reach with it. But using the AI, they were able to scale the training to reach lots of people. But the human's knowledge on this very specialised topic was used to inform the way the AI ran that training, and it made it very impactful. So it was really, really cool to see that working together, because alone the human couldn't have scaled it and the AI couldn't have been accurate, but together they were able to do both, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you kind of, I guess, again, me not being an AI expert, you sometimes think maybe you assume a little bit too much of AI's capability at this point. So it's, really interesting that it's actually the marriage that makes them work better. I guess in terms of human, how do I say this, like human input, I guess there might also be a concern then with AI about how do you sort of moderate and monitor what content it comes up with, speaking specifically about inappropriate content or dangerous or harmful content. How, from your side of the table where you're developing AI, how do you monitor that and make sure that it's a safe tool to use for people, especially in learning?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and certainly concerns about biased content or explicit content or even harmful stuff is very valid. because AI can generate those responses out in the wild, so to speak. So, and in learning and development, you want to make sure that it also stays on track, so it doesn't wander off and go do other things, and instead of like talking to the learners about what it's supposed to be doing. But in terms of what you can do, there's a lot you can do inside your applications to make it safe. So you can put guardrails in place that tell it how to respond in certain situations, or what to share or what not to share. And they can be really, really effective. You can also need to monitor the outputs. So look at what the AI is saying to the humans and make sure that it's what you expect, both in terms of accuracy and not being anything harmful. So those two things together work really well. And we had a really great example of that with someone who was running teacher training. It's actually teacher training on AI safety, just for a bit of irony. And so they really aggressively stress tested it to see if it would feed out information on, for example, drug use or self-harm. And even they even said, "Oh, can you talk dirty to me?" So we watched what the stress test did, and it all stayed on track. Basically, the AI kept either refusing to respond, or if the person said, I want to hurt myself, it actually gave them the number of a local counselling service. And it also suggested it should go and talk to a human about the problems it was facing. So it was a very appropriate response. So you can really keep these applications on track with the appropriate safeguards. And yeah, it's really cool to see that in action.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's definitely, I would not think to use that example when stress testing AI, but it's a perfectly valid point.
Yes.
But because we've had that a lot, not the talk dirty to me, but when, because you've obviously been developing our chatbot here at Video Arts, and when we've developed some with you as well, I know you talked about sort of tone of voice and how it interacts with a person. Because of course, no one wants an AI chatbot that's going to hurl abuse at them or be really nasty. That's not really conducive to learning. But I found that really interesting when we were talking about that as well, that you can sort of temper its temper, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was really cool because I think we were playing with the leadership sins content and we were trying to get it to be a little bit more sardonic. And that was really fun to see what the output of that was. And it was really, really fun. Like it's got a bit of a sense of humour, really.
No, it was interesting to see because, again, you don't always assume that that's a possibility with something that's not human, to be sarcastic and dry and witty. So that was really cool. Leading on then, I guess, to learner expectations and what people expect from AI kind of ties in with the anxiety element of it a bit, in terms of, I think some people think it's just going to do absolutely everything for you. Like, oh, great, that's it. AI's here. It's just going to completely replace me. Literally, just every single thing that I do, it can do it straight away. I think there's maybe a bit of hesitancy in terms of appreciating that, I guess, using AI is a skill in itself. What's your kind of experience and thoughts been around learner expectations with using it?
Yeah, well, I reckon the number one thing is you got to let people know they're talking to AI. So because if people mistakenly think they're talking to a human, they might ask it to do certain things. Like I've seen on the log, sometimes people say, "Do you know what my password is?" I'm like, no, it's not the right tool. And we try to be really upfront that people are talking to AI and these are the strengths and limitations of the AI. So I think that's definitely part of the journey, is educating your users and educating your learners, being really transparent about the fact that you're using AI, being transparent about how you use any of the data around that. I think that's important so that people feel safe when they're using it, as well as so they've got the right expectation about what it can and can't do. So,
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of it comes as well with the more that we use AI, the more we become more accustomed to it and get used to it. Because I still, would say myself, I use it a bit, but not a huge amount. There's that, I think a lot of the time it is that hesitancy, I don't know what this is. We see this ourselves as well. If you don't fully understand something, I guess that will come with time as people use it more.
Definitely. And certainly with educating people over time on the strengths and weaknesses, I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely.
But it can be hard to know where to start, can't it?
Yeah, gosh, it is. There's a lot to take in. So in terms of making AI actually an effective tool to use in learning, rather than sort of assuming it's a one-size-fits-all or looking at it perhaps as a bit of a gimmick, as just a happy little add-on, because I appreciate everyone is talking about AI, everyone's trying to kind of get on the boat and get involved. How do you actually, what would your advice be to how do you actually make it effective and useful in learning?
Well, I think with a lot of things in learning, you really need to try and personalise it to the learner's experiences so that the learning sticks. If you can help people to really relate it to what they're doing in their day-to-day life, that's incredibly useful and very powerful. So, yeah, and if you use AI for that sort of purpose, it's not a gimmick. It really does deepen the experience of learning and make it a lot more worthwhile and impactful. But that personalisation is so critical. So, for example, if you, let's say, run a risk management scenario using AI and you say, well, it's for a high school teacher, what would be relevant scenarios for a high school teacher to be dealing with risk management? You'll find it might say things like, oh, what about an active shooter drill? Because its training data is predominantly American. So it will draw on examples from America first before it goes somewhere else. But if you said, well, what would be a relevant scenario for an Australian teacher? It might say something more like extreme weather. So, for example, extreme heat, dealing with a heat wave at your school. So that personalisation, that context is so important when you're working with AI in a learning context. And it's very, very powerful. If you give it the right direction, it's very, very powerful.
I guess that's why it's so important then to understand how to use AI. Like we mentioned, how using AI in and of itself is a skill that needs to be acquired and learned and developed over as we integrate AI more into learning. I suppose that, because like you just said, because I find this even using it myself sometimes, if I give it bad instructions, it's not going to do, a bit like with a human, if you don't tell them to do the right thing, they're not going to do the right thing. I mean, where do you see, just to add an extra little bit onto this, where do you kind of see, I guess specifically in L&D, the AI scape going in the next few years? Do you think it's developing super rapidly, or is that just an assumption that we make because it feels that way?
No, I think it's definitely evolving really fast. And I think people are starting to get better and better at leveraging the strengths of the AI. Instead of just going, oh, square peg, round hole, let's see if it fits. They're actually playing around with it more and going, it does a really good job with this and not as good a job with that. And as people start to find these examples or use cases where it works really well and then double down, it will just get better and better, which is very cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, you really do need to play around and find those spaces where it works well.
Yeah. So I think a common issue, at least in my experience when speaking to people about AI, is there's a hesitancy around getting on board with it, just full stop. And I think there's plenty of people who are just sort of like, no, I don't get it, or I'm not interested in understanding it, I just don't really want to touch it, I'd rather just stay to what I'm doing now. What would your opinions be in terms of, yes, in L&D, but just generally on getting on board with AI? Do you think it's a you must or else? Or do you think it's like, just what are your thoughts on it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, people can do what they want to do, but I mean, the reality is that AI is not going anywhere, and it's going to become a very big part of our work culture one way or another, and that includes learning and development. And if people feel hesitant about it, I totally get it. There's lots of different reasons why people would feel nervous about using AI, particularly in bigger institutions. And yeah, it all makes sense. But I mean, I think finding ways to do test programs, pilot programs, start small, work your way up. You don't have to, do everything straight away. And there are lots of different ways now as well to address some of the different concerns people have around things like data privacy that are getting much, much more evolved. And that's one of the exciting things about this space is it's moving really fast, which can be overwhelming, but also it's moving really fast to solve some of the problems that people have originally come up against. And that's really cool too. So,
Yeah, I feel like maybe there's this sense of kind of haste that people think, oh, I've got to get on board with it right now and, I don't know, roll out this, if you're designing learning, roll out this really impressive AI feature. But it's, I think what you've said there about starting small and kind of taking things at your own pace is important. Just because AI is moving really fast doesn't mean you have to match its pace. Obviously, if you can, great, but I don't think anyone can match the pace of AI.
Well, I mean, it's possible to do a lot more now with AI than you otherwise could before. So if you want to keep up, you definitely can. Yeah. But I think it's more a question of figure out where you want to start solving your problems. And if you start small and you work with a pilot program and then you can make it bigger and scale it quite rapidly thanks to the capabilities of the technology, which is really awesome. So yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. And I guess another good point in terms of kind of tackling the overwhelm that goes along with AI is sort of not viewing it as this big scary beast that, oh, I don't really know where to start, but actually viewing it more as something that's going to assist you and almost act like a colleague, which is kind of what we've done with a subtle plug, the video arts chatbot, which is there really to enhance the content that we already have. And it's worked really well for us so far with our clients who do have it, because it just adds that extra kind of personalization that you talked about earlier. And you developed the chatbot, so you must be very proud of it.
Yeah, no, my team and I are really proud of it, and we found it's been really effective in a number of different contexts. So lots of different learners, from teachers to accountants to lawyers and humanitarian workers. Like, it's very, very, very cool. And yeah, it is really cool because one of the things it does is it supports people on their learning journey. It's not there as a threat, it's not there to judge, it's just there to help you practice and to help you learn. And when you're using AI in the broader world as well, you can think of it as a supportive companion rather than something that's big and scary, or alternatively something that's going to solve all your problems for you. It does rely very heavily as a tool on the humans using it, and that's just such an important thing to remember.
And then leading on from that, AI, as we know, can be very overwhelming, especially if it's developing really quickly, as you're saying, and it feels that way. How would you counter that? Like, on the side of the table that you're sat, where you're kind of developing these conversations, what would you say to someone who's saying, oh, I just feel it's so overwhelming, I don't know where to start, I don't know how to use it, I'm afraid to use it, or whatever? What would your advice be?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess firstly it is pretty overwhelming, isn't it? I mean, every week it's changing, which is really exciting, but it's also really hard to keep up. And even people who work full time in the space find it hard to keep up. So they're not alone. But I mean, the way that I would recommend starting is think of something that is either a pain point for you or an area of interest or curiosity, and really start there and see what you can do. So, for example, when ChatGPT first came out, the first thing that I thought about was, I wonder what sort of creative things it can do. So I decided to get it to write some Shakespearean sonnets about how wonderful coffee is. And it did such a good job with it. I was so impressed. I was like, wow, this is so creative, and it's really taking on the tone, and it really understands how to create this kind of immersive language. And from there, that was sort of what inspired us to start looking at other applications for it in that creative space, in that storytelling space, helping to immerse people in the stories of what they're learning about. And so if you had like a pain point that you were thinking, oh, it would be really good if I could just make this run more smoothly, or I'm really curious about whether I could do this, you kind of start there and then just start small and build up. And that's a really cool way to start. Yeah.
I suppose a lot of it is trial and error anyway, and you have to kind of accept that there's going to be a lot of mistakes made along the way, which of course is the premise of this whole podcast, learning from mistakes, and smoothly segueing into that note. We get each of our guests each time they come on this podcast to talk about a specific mistake or instance from earlier on in their career or their lives that they've learned from that's made them better at what they do now. Do you have one for us today, Sarah?
I have many. No, I'll just pick one though. I mean, I think this mistake really taught me not to take things at face value and always prepare even if it seems like you don't need to. So back in the day, as you said, I originally qualified as a lawyer, and I was very junior. I started out with a big government department, and I was really, really junior, and this senior lawyer calls me into their office and says, the court's emailed me this judgment. All you have to do is go down to the court and pick up the judgment from the bench. And I was like, okay, that sounds pretty simple. And they said, you don't need to read the file. It's fine. Just go. So I walked out the door and I got to the court, and then the judge turns around and says, I missed the fact that the other side had a bunch of attachments on the back of their submissions. So now I would like you to give me 25 minutes of submissions each on those attachments and how I should consider them in the context of this case. At which point I wished that the floor had opened up and swallowed me, but it did not, and I survived. But it taught me the value of, firstly, don't take someone's word for it, and secondly, always prep.
Yeah.
So, and that's something I've carried with me into the rest of my life. If anything, I over-prepare now.
Yeah, better to be that way. What is it? Fail to prepare, prepare to fail?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, God, I can imagine that would have been a stressful scenario.
Yes, the other lawyer thought it was hilarious when the judge left the room. They turned around and said to me, "Oh, you were freaking out." And I was like, "Yep."
You're like, yeah, it wasn't happening to you. It's okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your expertise.
Thanks.
And yeah, hope to see you again.
Thanks, Alice.